Welcome to our panel discussion from infrastructure engineering to platform engineering. I'm your moderator, Josh Kadroff. I am a principal customer success architect here at Pulumi. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years, and I've seen just about every different way you can use Pulumi. Today, we have some Pulumi customers with us that are going to share their platform engineering advice and expertise. So let's start with some introductions.
So my name is James. I'm a staff engineer on our infrastructure team here at Clear. And you may have seen us in the airports with our expedited security lanes there, but here at Clear, we're also building sort of digital identity as a broader platform for everything, whether that's renting tools at the hardware store or getting into the stadium faster at sporting events. So I work with our infrastructure team as well as our developer experience team and a handful of other teams within production engineering to sort of build out our, as we say, internal developer platform, right? So whether that's engineers provisioning their infrastructure or how services connect to each other from the networking perspective, I'm sort of working across teams to help build all of that.
My name is Zach Cook. I'm a senior DevOps manager here at Modivcare. And over this last year or so, we've built a kind of a cloud native or a cloud platform engineering team to sort of help drive a lot of transformation here at Modivcare. So Modivcare is a product of several years of acquisition, several years of different pockets of kind of things. And so as a result, our landscape had started pretty dynamic. There was a lot of really good cloud native engineering. There's a lot of brick and mortar rack and stack stuff. And kind of our guiding light has been how to normalize that and meet basically every team where it lives today versus where it needs to go. Basically building as much acceleration as possible without mandating migrations to a single set of tools or anything like that.
So my name is Simon. I'm the founder of Sokkel, a really early stage startup. I've used Pulumi for, I think it was 2018 or 19 for the first time. And also worked for a company called Björk for a very, very long time, doing platform engineering. And my background is engineering, and so my role in most of these companies has been to build the platforms and support the team essentially. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with what exactly platform engineering means to each of you. Like, platform engineering can mean a lot of different things depending on the org, depending on the context. What do you feel are the essential ingredients of platform engineering as a practice? James, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I think to me, the most important sort of component is identifying the common tooling and resources and solutions that your engineering teams need and making the road for those really well paved. So building out essentially a really polished and easy to use toolkit of solutions that engineers can reach for really easily, so that they're not blocked on infrastructure or other sorts of solutions on that side, trying to actually solve business problems. So I think a big part of that for us is identifying what those really commonly used patterns are, making them really easy to use, and then also sort of anticipating where things will go next, right? So we don't want developers to come to us with necessarily with feature requests that they need today, they're blocked on, that sort of thing. So trying to have an idea of, where can we grow support in the platform for new features that we think people will need going forward is kind of an important balance to strike.
Interesting. What was the situation like at Clear before there was like a concerted platform effort? Like, did you have to use stick as well as carrot in terms of narrowing the list of tools that developers were able to use?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. I think previously, we'd had a focus on providing sort of lower level tools, taking that maybe what I would call a more traditional DevOps approach of saying, we want teams to own their infrastructure end to end, so we're going to provide a really low level suite of tools that they can use to build whatever it is that they need. I think we found that caused a lot of friction, and it caused our engineering teams to spend a lot of time fighting with those low level tools rather than actually solving the problems that they're trying to solve. So what we've tried to do to move away from that is to say, okay, what are the common use cases here? Let's try and make those really, really easy to use and get people to enjoy using the products that we put out, so that hopefully in the future we can move to more of a scenario where people want to use our tools because they have a good experience with them. We have a track record of, providing the features that they need out of the box, or before they know they need them. Right.
I think maybe a little bit biased from coming from like a heavily compliance driven initiative, right? But there's absolutely the governance and compliance aspects that are baked into it. I think fundamentally platform engineering offers acceleration, right? That's the big deal. So coming into kind of an older organization, there's real-time measurements of, if I want to get a change made or I want to get a piece of architecture stood up, that might involve having a ticket, having a traditional IT response that's measured in days to weeks, as far as depending on how complex the change is, and then delivering something where I think our guiding light, our story that we're trying to tell is that we'd really like to get to a place where there is a day one engineer that is hired. They're hired in the morning, and then they actually have their first production deployment by lunch, and we celebrate as an office, like as a thing. And we'd like to really get it to where all of the compliance and all of everything that makes that deployment possible are in the platform. That's part of what the platform engineering is bringing to the table, is that all that compliance is there, but it's the best kind because it feels invisible to the end user.
I think if we can also look at this in a little bit more abstract way. I think the way that you should look at it is as a internal digital product more than just some technical solution, right? So the goal of platform engineering is essentially to move the complexity, right? So you can reduce the mental weight of a developer, so that they can understand what they need to understand in order to get productive and quick, as Zach said, right? So and those it's really important to remember that as a core thing for at least for the product to work, I guess, or the concept to work internally.
So let's talk about the role of infrastructure as code in platforms. It's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, to use an expression. So beyond the obvious case for cloud infrastructure resources, are you managing anything else with infrastructure as code that enables your app teams to move faster?
We began using GitHub, right? We not just using AWS or GCP resources, but we were using the GitHub provider as well, which was a really good start. It was just simple stuff in the beginning with, setting up GitHub action secrets and stuff like that. But in the end, we've now, I think we provision access to repositories. We have really used it in detail there, and expanded also to secrets, right, with Pulumi ESC, and now also giving it into the command line as well, and on the local environment. And that's where sort of everything comes together, at least in our team. Yeah, I think you could start with the Kubernetes thing, because that's one of the things that I really found interesting, because we've been passing around, if you use GCP, you have to have the G Cloud command line, right? And that is sort of your authentication toolchain for your Kubernetes engine. So what we did was that we have exposed the kube config environment variable. So it's available for you in the command line, which makes it so much easier for people to jump between the environments. That's one thing. But what we also ended up doing is that we were able to create much smaller applications, or you could say Pulumi projects, based on using the kube configuration, and have that inherited through and imported, you could say, in the different ESC configs. It was a really valuable little thing, but it was really valuable for us.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite use cases for ESC, is actually Kubernetes cluster access, because it combines like two things in ESC. So both typically you're using OIDC credentials, and then you're going to use an import and then bring in the kube config on top of that, and that's like gives you really convenient temporary access to clusters. That's awesome. Okay. James or Zachary, do you want to chime in on Pulumi? The general languages approach, how you're leveraging those features, or ESC or insights?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I think for us, the general purpose programming language, excuse me, aspect is really attractive because it makes it possible to tie together resources in a way that maybe you can't with something that's a DSL like HCL. Um, One of the big things that I think is helpful there as well is the ability to call out to things that may not have providers implemented for them, integrate with things a little bit more flexibly, right? So obviously, if there's not a provider available for something and you just need to fetch a couple of data values, it's really easy to use your standard programming language facilities to, in our case, one of the applications there is, fetching various bits of metadata about what teams are valid, that sort of thing, so that we can do a little bit of extra validation, make sure that everything's integrated in the same place that we expect it to be. And so I think having that flexibility to, call out to external sources a little bit more easily, and, do more complex transformations on resources to tie things together. So whether that's automatically generating Datadog monitors for resources that recreate, right? That sort of thing, I think, is a lot easier to do when you have the full power of general purpose programming languages available.
I just really appreciate the general language model because as somebody who has a bit of a programming background as well as an infrastructure background, one of the biggest frustrations I had with most modern infrastructure, most DevOps, is just how much time I spend hand editing YAML files and things of that nature. And I really feel like that should be something that's generated for me rather than something that I edit. I love to be able to review it, but I really hate working with it. So I like that. I like that Pulumi kind of blends that in, and then you still get something that's ultimately end of the day a declarative thing, but it's generated with languages. It's really nice, kind of a nice hybrid. Um, Beyond like just the normal infrastructure as code, as normal as far as cloud computing, we have leveraged some of the providers as well. It's kind of a similar thing, setting up our Git repos in a certain way, or reaching out and creating Datadog things. Policy as code has helped to get some leverage as well because it extends into the provider models. So we might have something where we need a certain tag or anything like that, and all of a sudden we now have this platform that gives us the ability to govern that across multiple providers. We don't need to figure out how to do a tag policy in each of these different platforms. So that's been really nice to kind of bring it together where we can start to boil things down to, if it's done with Pulumi, we have this policy engine behind it. We have the standardization right there. It gives a lot of pathways that weren't there previously, which is nice.
All right. So let's move on to self-service and golden paths. Tell me about your organization's journey in platform engineering. What were the motivations for starting a team?
The initial takeaway was that we wanted something that was going to be a single place, a single source of, or a single pane of glass where all these different integrations through all these different acquisitions and so forth could look the same. So we had, I expect, a fairly common problem of companies that have come together from acquisition where just because we had source control everywhere, we didn't necessarily have the same source control. We bought this company that had GitHub, and then this company was using GitLab, and you can take an initiative and say, okay, everyone's in GitLab by the end of the year, but in the meantime, you're trying to give value, trying to give what software exists in GitHub and exists in GitLab. How do I track this kind of initiative? So just general categorization and cataloging was a fundamental need, and so that we're using Backstage for our IDP, and that was like the day one initiative was like, let's just figure out where everything even lives, and try and get a way to get it in there, and then we'll start to measure it. From there, we shot right for the golden path. Like, let's create scaffolder that does a fully loaded pipeline with all of our best practices.
I'd like to know if anybody wants to chime in on how do you figure out the right things to build and what things to either not build or not build right now into your platform?
I could go through a little bit of our, story there, because we started off building a lot of, you could say, components and modules, you could probably call them. And we imagine that it would be a lot easier for everyone in the different teams to work with it. But what we learned early on was that it's actually the most basic things that are the most used, because we're not able to, we weren't able to find exact resources and modules to build that fit the real needs, right? So And we also weren't able to create great documentation fairly easily. So at some point, we ended up using more of the native features of Pulumi and just expose that to people, and then ask people to create more. You get smaller Pulumi projects, and then you can hook on the bigger resources instead.
So maybe we could also talk about like what is the application team's experience using your platform today, and if there is a gap between what you have today and your ideal state, what would the ideal state look like?
Platform we have today is about a year old, so it is still somewhat immature in that sense. So today it looks like it's a very like purpose specific thing. If I need to create something new, and a software engineer might think to go to the platform. But if there's documentation that might still be in some Confluence doc, or like there's all these existing patterns that have lived here for a number of years that people are just accustomed to. So what we're kind of looking to, what that future state is we're trying to find small journeys and reasons for a developer to want to use or need to use the developer portal every day to try and give that value whatsoever. So that's again what we're looking at, kind of smaller examples. So for you use like modules or kind of that form right before the IDP. Well, if we've got a pretty good module system, we actually have created a scaffolder where all it does is add a Pulumi module to your existing project. Makes it very easy. What Pulumi modules exist? What is the platform team stood up for me if I want to make an S3 bucket, or if I want to make an API gateway module, like, is there an opinionated thing for this? Well, the old process was go look over here or ask another engineer or look at this repository over in GitLab. Whereas now it's like there is a scaffolder for that specifically. So it kind of changes that to, we want to try and get more and more. The first instinct should be to look in the developer portal and see if it has something for me there. So that's establishing and fleshing out more of the search capabilities, more of the tech docs. I think getting code search in line is something that was sort of a pie in the sky for us. We want to try and get that in. We'd like for there to be whatever you're looking for. There's a single search field. It'll pull up if there's a scaffolder, if there's a module, if there's documentation to that effect, if there's a team working on it. Like we want that to be all in one, to just drive more of that daily task workflow. And then it changes from this thing that you have to remember exists to go find whatever to this thing that you're in all day anyway. And so why wouldn't you start there looking for it?
That's a very mature platform engineering practice, by the way, if I may say so. So James, I'm sure that you have quite a few regulatory requirements in your org. How do you interface with your security team? And like, were there any challenges getting buy-in from security in allowing an automated, assuming that you do have an automated process to production, but was there any challenges in getting security to buy in to a more sort of green light by default model?
I think one of the things that really helped us out there was that with Pulumi, both through the use of policy packs and just through the actual way that we're deploying it, which is to sort of provide canned modules that folks can use off the shelf, it gives us some really strong levers to say, there is simply no way to create non-compliant infrastructure in the first place. So I think that was a big goal for us from the start, is to say, how can we enforce those kinds of requirements, whether it's tagging or, security group rules, anything like that. How can we enforce that from day one? And so I think that was something we could present to them and say, hey, look, this is actually a goal of ours as well, right? One of our, I would say historically, one of our big problems has been that we don't enforce much in the way of the shape of infrastructure with some of our existing tooling. And so that's something that we wanted as an infrastructure team to say, if we want to roll out a new feature, how can we be sure that everybody's existing configurations are relatively the same shape? But also from security side, they want to be able to say, are we compliant with these regulatory frameworks? So having the ability to enforce that, at the preview stage, even before things get deployed to prod or even to dev, to say we're enforcing this via policy packs and also via just what is possible to be created in code, was a really big win for both us and our security org.
All right, so let's talk about platform adoption, platform love. How do you depending on your scale, right? So if you're huge scale. Also, just for real quick, how many developers do each of your organizations have that are consuming your platform?
Tough to say exactly, but I'd say there's probably closer to 200, where it maybe isn't just software engineers, but also general infrastructure folks. So one of the joys of bringing infrastructure as code, as part of our challenge has been we've had a lot of infrastructure people have to look at code, and that's part of we talked about the multi-language and multi-language model earlier. One of the selling points there, and one of the easiest acceleration points, has been to show some of the like a server engineer. Look, it's just expressed as a YAML file. Like, well, it can be expressed as code or YAML. It really does the same thing, and so getting people on board with wherever their comfort level is has been nice. But all in, I'd say there's about 200 people that are trying to work with Pulumi or the platform here.
And so how do you manage your relationships with those application teams? Do you know all of the leads personally, or maybe like, use an envoy model where, each platform engineer on the team is responsible to they're the primary point of contact for some number of app teams? Or, I mean, are you using more research backed methods like satisfaction, developer experience surveys and satisfaction surveys? How do you measure both the level of love for your platform and the actual level of adoption?
That journey for us is still fairly young. So with a year out of development, we've really started to integrate with our first teams. I'd say this quarter, really, as far as we've got a lot of good stuff built. Let's see it, and that was because we had an opportunity to basically start to do some really net new stuff, right? So once you have a greenfield project in an org this size, you get a lot of developers, you get a lot of team leads, you get a lot of interest, and it's like let's try to build this all with platform engineering from like day one and see how that goes. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And that's been very valuable. So what we're doing right now is we're doing a series of like office hours. We're doing a series of like a scrum of scrums once in a while, where there are team leads, and on our team leads, all teams have product ownership. So at least the product people can get together and kind of work that out. What that looks like 6 months from now is highly dependent on how well what we're doing today works out for us. But we do have some capability of like insights and measurements in Backstage. There are surveys. We haven't really thought about actually running any of those exercises just yet, but like, I think that'll make sense pretty soon.
And like, what's your goal for any any workloads that existed prior to the development of your platform, or your current generation of your platform? Are you going to try to port those onto the platform, or are you going to leave them as is?
No, I think we'll port them, and I think that's where Insights specifically is offering a lot of a lot of acceleration for us. Is that because we've defined policy as code for our Pulumi infrastructure as code projects, and now that Insights is coming along to kind of start to hook into that, that represents quite a lot for us, right? So and it represented a lot of our relationship with Pulumi change as well, where we initially were towing into this. I think like a lot of larger enterprises look at just new greenfield stuff. Let's try this. That represents a few hundred, maybe a few thousand resources. And when it comes to now, we want to scan all of our existing older infrastructure that wasn't provisioned with all the new rules like that. That's in the millions. So it's a very different kind of turnkey overnight scale change, and it represents like a lot of work and a lot of potential there. But that's that view, that way of categorizing what is already infrastructure as code, what is just a scan, how much do you have to go, who owns what, bringing in our custom policies that we're using for code to express that against other older legacy infrastructure to see where it stands, immediately feels like that argument to those teams of like this, you've got these compliance issues. If you just port this into Pulumi, automatically it fixes it for you, right? So that's a big tool, and it's something of a we're trying to it can look like a stick. The Pulumi policy is code, but I think we're trying to phrase it as a carrot, in the sense that we've had a lot of good infosec people here, and that means that they've had a lot of good cloud scanning tools and so forth. And the reality is that once you pick up something like that, like an out of date version of this or that, whatever the developer was doing, or whatever that team was doing that week, is now replaced by, you've got to update this Kubernetes version or something they're really not all that interested in worrying about. So having that scan up front while they're in it, while they're looking at their code, while they're trying to get whatever they're done with, actually is a lot more. I think that's a lot more empathetic than coming around after the fact and like delivering a list of findings of things that they have to fix that they weren't planning on working on that week.
Surprise. And you're making the stick out of carrots, which is an excellent strategy. Okay, so it is the year of our Lord 2025, and there has to be an AI question. So, how do you see AI having an impact on your platform? Either today, in the future, will there be an impact? And you might even want to break that down between like how do you see that um, how do you see that evolving for your application teams? Or do you see like SREs using it more for like operational concerns? What type of scenarios are you seeing today? Do you see in the near future, or do you envision for the far future?
I think there's a couple things that come to mind for me. One is sort of in that similar vein that we already mentioned, I think, with insights of like gathering sort of an overview of what's the current landscape look like, right? So one of the things might be, you know, looking at existing cloud resources, trying to get a general sense of what the shape of things is, group things into, relatively large buckets. But the other thing, sort of that you touched on a little bit there, is from the SRE side, incident response. I think one of the other things that we have seen a little bit of a challenge with is sometimes understanding impact of issues across teams, or understanding root causes, sort of different. I guess I would phrase this as sort of different directions of the same problem, right? Is sort of understanding how problems impact or manifest across services or systems. And I think maybe one of the big areas of opportunity there is for building in some of that deep, complex understanding of how all of the components of our systems fit together, so that somebody on maybe the mobile team who's not as familiar with our airports or our Clear One business might be able to understand, okay, here is the issue I'm seeing. Here's maybe how it fits into the broader landscape of Clear's architecture. Here's the root cause. Here's other systems that might be impacted. So I think helping folks get a better overview of how architectural components fit together is a big opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's personally, I have a semi-skeptical view, I guess, of AI. But one of the things I think it is excellent at is summarizing things, maybe picking out interesting associations that you might not have found. So it's like really, really good for like suggestions. I'd like your perspective on this since you run a small org. Are you, do you see your organization either today or in the future leveraging AI to perhaps sort of like to use an expression, punch above your weight?
Modivcare has got a lot of AI initiatives just in general. I mean, you kind of hit, I think, one of the most clear use cases for AI is summarizing a lot of data pretty well. So we've got a variety of success stories and like small buckets of the organization, right? Like I mentioned, a strong InfoSec posture. That means we have a SIEM that's aggregating just tons and tons of log data. And that's really, really useful to put an AI engine over the top of that. And we've proven some strategies for that where, this thing picks out and draws associations between all these different data sets. Frankly, impossibly better than even a human could, right? Like it's too much of a fire hose of information to really see that coming. So taking some of those wins in clear cut, kind of narrow scope things, and then bringing that into platform engineering, where the whole point is to get all these different disconnected data sources, so into a single pane of glass. I kind of foresee something where a network engineer could come in and ask our developer portal, like, what code is provisioning AWS firewalls out there? Like, what's defining the VPCs? Where does this subnet live? Just plain English questions, and then getting a pretty decent summary of like, across these 4 repos, crawling up all these stack references, doing all these things. Like, here's where that subnet exists. Like, oh, cool, thanks. Moving on.
What network paths exist between different entities?
Yeah,
which is a very, very hard problem to solve. And when I was an infrastructure engineer, there was that like sort of old trope that like it's always the security groups.
Right, and that's useful there, and it's enriched by a lot of other platforms that are doing AI. So Pulumi Insights with its AI query, we're using cloud scanning like Orca. It has an AI summary, so just kind of bringing all that into one place, or at least making it aware that if you didn't get the right answer over here, there's at least these 3 other integrations where you could try asking them. Like that'll be something we possibly bring in before making it a nice layered, sophisticated single query kind of approach.
All right. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, James, Zachary, Simon. And thank you for spending your time with us. And we hope you enjoy the rest of Pulumi Up. So long, everybody.